Unfortunately for organizations and for employees, leaders are not created equal. We can all think of leaders who we admired, motivated us, engaged us, brought the best in us out, and helped us become better versions of ourselves, helped us become great employees, or simply were there to support us to do the best job we could. And then again, we could all think of leaders that have a contrasting example, right? Leaders that maybe demotivated us, leaders that made us feel uncomfortable, leaders that made it to where our job was simply more arduous. And I think one of the big realities for us to embrace as leaders is that tactics matter. The way we approach people really matters. Let's take a look at one simple example, and that's motivating employees. I often coach leaders and work with leaders in workshops who share that some of their tactics are to be real with people, to be very transparent, and they begin to share what that looks like. And oftentimes what that looks like is a bit of a fear-based strategy. So see if something like this sounds familiar to you. Well, if we don't hit our quarterly numbers this quarter, heads are going to roll. Well, I hope that people remember who butters their bread. Anyone not putting in overtime won't be considered for a promotion. We need hard workers here. I don't want to see mistakes like this happen again. Unfortunately, we've all had stories of leaders like this, and what those statements do, what that tactic is, it's a fear-based leadership tactic, and the result is epically and dramatically worse than what they're actually trying to solve for. Here's what I mean by that. When you lead with the tactics of a fear-based strategy, the energy of your employees, of your teams, becomes more narrow. They enter into a survival kind of mode, and your tactics end up backfiring. In fact, that energy and that focus that employees typically have, it turns inward towards self-preservation and defensive mode rather than where you want it to actually be. So what is the contrast? The contrast is the engagement-driven leader. And this is the leader that realizes that to show somebody the possibility in something, the opportunity in something. So an engagement-driven leader might say, here's the opportunity that this quarter presents for our growth. Let's explore what's possible when we leverage everyone's strengths. We're facing a very difficult problem, but I know that everyone's input is going to make a huge difference. What support do you need right now to do your best work? That shift from a fear-based strategy to an engagement-driven leadership strategy makes a huge difference. It actually wires people to step into a possibility mode. It brings over that same neurological arousal that fear actually uses and channels it in a positive way. Instead of it channeling you towards being defensive and moving into a survival mode, instead of it triggering you, it actually moves employees into excitement, into creativity, and into a desire of motivation to want to take part. And there's many, many reasons for this. Reasons such as we're all wired towards wanting to see positive gains in something. We also want to feel in control. And when you show us possibilities of something and we can engage in the process to get to that possibility, that's far more motivating, far more rewarding than you using warnings or threat tactics to try to motivate your employees. Sadly, I think a lot of leaders, this is what their tactic is, right? That fear-based strategy, that's what they're used to. They think that works, and unfortunately it doesn't. It ends up backfiring quite a bit. And I want to see more leaders pivot to not just how we're built from a neuroscience standpoint, but to a way that really recognizes the human side of people and that looks at more engagement-driven strategies. Again, those fear-based strategies, they narrow people's focus. They stifle innovation. They narrow thinking. They make us run into survival mode. But instead, that engagement-driven leader that shows us possibilities, that shows us opportunities, that ultimately pulls us towards the future. It puts us in the driver's seat, in a contributing seat to say, we can take part in this meaningful future. It gives us that sense of control, that sense of agency, that sense of optimism for what is actually possible.